Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today we have a very large announcement to go over, as the Doors developers just revealed that they're going to be updating the game more. And what's more, they actually revealed to us what the next updates are going to be. I am super excited to go over all of this new information in this video, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. So let's begin. Alright, so in summary, the developers, as you probably know, have been releasing updates every 4 months. And, you know, that's kind of hard on the game as well as content creators as myself, as for a long period of time, we're in a content drought. However, now the developers are actually going to be planning on releasing monthly updates in something new called batches. Essentially, what a batch is, as they've described, is a miniature update that takes features from a major update and releases them early, typically ones unrelated to the major updates. Just as a rough example, as you know, a bunch of Rift Rooms were added in the Outdoors update, and so if those were a batch, then those Rift Rooms would be released separately earlier before the Outdoors update for players to experience. Anyways, this batch system is actually very good for the game's player count as well as content creators as myself. And so I'm just super excited to see us finally get something like this. Now, the developers did go more into detail about this, so I'm going to go more into detail about this as well. So let's just move on. Now, with the release of the batch system indoors, unfortunately that means the room's overhaul update is delayed. As you probably know, it was teased to release this month. However, instead we'll now be getting a batch this month instead of this update, and it'll be pushed back to early 2026. Now, as to what the batch that's replacing the room's overhaul update is actually going to be, I have a pretty good idea, and it's something the developers actually teased themselves. You may have seen in that last message that they said an example of a batch would be the addition of a new mines entity, and I think you may see where I'm going with this. However, I believe it's very likely that the next batch is going to be the introduction. Oh wait, hold on, this is the wrong slide. Well, before I get into that, let me just go over the batch release schedule. As I said, the developers have confirmed that it will release once every month. However, it is possible that the schedule may change. Anyways, going back to the original plan, the next batch is going to be the introduction of Wade. Now, I'm sure you've heard me talk about Wade a lot of times on this channel before, but in summary, they are a slug-alligator hybrid that was originally planned to be released alongside the Mines release. However, they were scrapped. Now, it was actually teased that they were going to be added alongside the room's overhaul update. However, I believe that they're going to be implemented in the next batch. This is because, since they were going to be added in the room's update, which is near completion, this entity is already completed most likely, and it received development prior to Floor 2 releasing, so this thing is practically done, at least in my eyes. Also, like I said, the developers have teased that an example of a batch would be a new entity to the mines. You can see it right there. And so I think it's very likely that we'll finally be able to encounter Wade in the mines in the next batch coming this month. The developers also said that some other additions to the mines may be added, such as new rooms, so that is also definitely a plus. However, Wade is definitely going to be the main focus here. That's not all though, as the developers also teased what a future batch after this Wade one is likely going to be, probably coming after the rooms update as well, and that is a greenhouse area to the mines. Now, as you know, at the end of the hotel, players have to actually face the greenhouse, an area that tests all the skills they've learned so far. Unfortunately, a greenhouse type area doesn't exist in the mines. However, the developers have confirmed that there are plans to add one, and that it will likely be released in one of these batches, seeing how it's a smaller update rather than a large-scale one, such as the Outdoors or the Room's overhaul update. So yeah, expect to see a greenhouse for the mines sometime in the next coming months. Anyways, moving on, this isn't exactly confirmed information, however, based on my experiences with the developers, they have a bunch of planned features which have yet to be released. And seeing how this whole batch system gives them the opportunity to release originally scrapped content such as Wade, I believe that all of this stuff that I've mentioned right here could potentially be inside of batches. So I've already went over Wade, however, it's possible that a Caw overhaul could also be implemented. As you probably know, Caws are mostly an environmental entity in the outdoors. However, the developers did have somewhat of a rough plan to update them to give them more of a functionality. So it's possible that these Caw updates could be implemented in one of the future batches. Additionally, the developers also talked about revamping the second Hotel Seek chase, and that could also be part of a batch, seeing how it is a smaller update. Additionally, the developers also talked about the monument modifier, which implements monuments to the hotels. And given how much effort that modifier seems to have, at least compared to other modifiers in the game, I definitely see this as being part of its own batch. Lastly, the developers have briefly talked about adding more rush variants to the game besides just normal rush and ambush. So this could definitely be part of a batch as well. I know this is actually one of the most highly requested updates in the entire game, so I definitely think the developers will add it at some point, and these batches seem like the perfect opportunity to do so. Anyways, moving on from the batch stuff, a bunch of other mini updates were also confirmed. For example, as you probably know, the only buddies in game are the Pupkin, which are limited, and then the El Goblino and Sally buddies, which actually cost real money. However, the developers did confirm here, and to me personally, that buddies will be available to be purchased in the shop for knobs. So this is just reassurance that that feature is definitely coming, which is pretty cool. It's definitely nice to see more easily obtainable buddies in the game. On the topic of buddies too, and Christmas, since it's the holiday season now, a Christmas-themed buddy is going to release sometime in the future, or sometime this month, I should say. Now, the developers did confirm that it's not going to be a snowman, however, seeing how no Doors entities are currently Christmas-themed, I assume this Christmas buddy is going to be similar to the Pupkin, which is just a random holiday-themed character just plopped into the game. Which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, however, it's something to note. But yeah, Christmas buddy is coming. On the topic of Christmas, the developers also teased a bunch of new Christmas-themed item skins that are also coming. In this image, we can see a flashlight and shake light themed around candy canes, as well as something else themed around a candy cane with a bow tie. I'm not exactly sure what this could be. It could be just part of a lockpick. I definitely know it's not a glow stick, as the developers said that, but if you have any idea what this candy cane with a bow tie is, let me know in the comments. But yeah, we are definitely getting Christmas item skins, which is pretty cool. And that about sums up all the new stuff teased in this announcement and Q&A session. It was kind of both. I am super excited for this batch system update, as it means we will finally be able to get content early, and it'll be dispersed. Sorry about that. The content will be dispersed throughout the months, which is good for the player count and content creators like me and all the other Doors video creators. But yeah. So, with all of that being said, let me know in the comments what you think of this whole batch update system, as well as what your ideas are as to what will come next in the batches. And thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.